بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah khairan for staying back, and also Jazakumullah khairan to the committee of the masjid for allowing me to say a few words here, mashallah. It's in one way, some of you may know, or a few of you may know, this is a slightly special place to me in that I think about 6 odd years ago I used to live just across the road, 121 Campbell Road, and I was more or less brought up in this area, further down where the flats used to be. Now I've moved slightly away just to Redbridge, not too far, but not too. What we thought, Brother Shafi and the committee and myself, we thought it's Ramadan, so what I'd like to do is I'd just like to remind ourselves about the overall goal or maqsad in Ramadan. And I'd like to tie that in with one particular hadith that I won't spend too long on, but I will make it the foundation of what I'd like to say. And it's a hadith that some of you will know, related in Al-Bukhari from Abu Aaliya radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, in which he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah said, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said that Allah Ta'ala said, Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantahu bil harb. The hadith starts by saying, Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantahu bil harb. Whoever shows enmity to a friend or a wali of mine, I shall be at war with him. This is what Allah says. Whoever shows enmity to a friend or a wali of mine, I shall be at war with him. وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ. And my servant doesn't draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than the obligatory duties I have enjoined upon him. وَمَا يَزَالَ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. And my servant continues to draw closer to me with optional deeds, with the nafilah, the optional acts, beyond the obligatory acts, until I love him. Until Allah says, until I love him. فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ. And when I love him, كُنْتُ سَمْعَهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ. Then I become his hearing with which he hears. وَبَصَرُهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ. And his seeing with which he sees. وَيَدُهُ الَّتِي يُبْتِشُ بِهَا. And his hand with which he strikes. وَرِجْلَهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا. And his feet or his foot with which he walks. وَإِن سَأَلَنِي لِأُعْطِيَنَّهُ. And if he were to ask me of anything, I would grant it to him. وَلَئِنِ اسْتَعَاذَنِي لَأُعْطِيَنَّهُ. And if he were to seek protection in me, I would protect him. I would grant him protection. SubhanAllah, it's a beautiful hadith, a beautiful statement of the Prophet ﷺ, which sets priorities for us and reveals something more about the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First and foremost, what gets us and what should strike us is Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantahu bil harb. Whoever shows enmity, aada, hana, whoever shows enmity, whoever mocks, whoever insults, whoever harms, whoever degrades, whoever makes life difficult for a wali of mine, I will be at war with him. Allah Jalla wa Ala has declared war upon someone who shows enmity, mocking or insult to one of Allah's wali or awliya. The plural of wali is awliya. So now the question comes, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made such a strong statement through the tongue of the Prophet which is recorded in Al-Bukhari, Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantu bil harb, then the first question that must come to mind is what? what is the first question that must come to mind in this statement? Whoever shows enmity to a wali of mine, I shall be at war with him. What's the first question that we need to ask? Barakallahu feekum. Who is the wali? Who is the wali? I'll tell you who the wali is first. Okay, does that make sense? The Prophet Allah says, I will be at war with someone who shows enmity to one of my awliya, one of my walis. Then the obvious question is, who is this wali? Who are these walis that I need to be careful of? Who the wali isn't is, for example, yesterday I conducted a nikah for somebody, and as many of you know, the three Sunni schools, the Malikis, the Shafis and the Hanbalis, they say that having a wali is shart sihatul nikah, is a condition for the soundness of the nikah to take place. And we normally consider the word wali to be, in the context of a nikah or a marriage, to be the father of the girl. The girl who's about to be married, the bride, she should have a legal guardian. And that legal guardian in our religious language, in the Quranic language, is called a wali. And the Hanafi school says that even though it's not a condition for the soundness of the marriage, then it's something that we should try to do, inshallah ta'ala, because it makes everything nicer. And the wali can look after the interests of the girl who is to be married. But they don't consider it a condition. That's not a problem. So we're not talking about that wali. Man aada li waliyan faqad aadantuhu bil harb. We're not talking about that wali. That whoever kind of dislikes the father of the girl, then khalas, Allah is going to be. No, it's not that case. So who is it? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, He gives us a clue. Who are these awliya, these walis? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Indeed, the awliya, the walis of Allah, upon them they shall not fear, and nor shall they grieve. Upon them shall be no fear, وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ, and nor shall they grieve. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. They are those who آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. They are those who have iman, faith. وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ, and have taqwa, have piety, God-fearingness. The two descriptions the Quran gives of who these awliya of Allah are. And sometimes we translate the word awliya as friends of Allah, and that's okay. That's a good translation. Except that when you use the word friend, well, I've got a friend in school, I've got a friend in college, I've got a friend at work, I've got a friend down the road. And sometimes the word friend doesn't do the word wali justice, but it gives us some type of idea that these awliya, these are friends, or very close friends of Allah. They have befriended Allah to such a, inshallah, to such a high degree, Allah has befriended them back to an even higher degree. And then Allah says, إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Upon these awliya, these men and women whose hearts are filled with so much iman, whose hearts are filled with so much love of Allah, whose hearts are filled with so much submission and obedience to Allah, and trust in Allah, and seeking intimacy with Allah. لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. No fear shall be upon them, nor shall they grieve. الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون. They are those who have iman and have taqwa. Now normally, when we talk about the awliya from the great Muslims of the past, for example, Hassan al-Basri, rahmatullah alayhi, Sirin, rahmatullah alayhi, all of the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, they are all awliya of Allah. All of them, without exception. But there are darajat, there are grades of even the awliya. Why? الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. The waliship of an individual Muslim, man or woman, will depend upon how much iman of faith they have and how much taqwa they have. The higher their faith, the higher their taqwa, their God-fearingness, the higher their waliship with Allah, the closer they are to Allah in friendship, and the closer Allah is to them in friendship. Now someone will think, well, mashallah, that's very nice. It's nice to talk about those people, but how does that affect me? Well, here is how it affects me. In perhaps one of the most celebrated writings on Muslim belief, called Aqidatul Tahawiyya, the belief of Orthodox Islam was penned very beautifully and very comprehensively by one of the great Hanafi scholars of about 1,000 years ago, Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi rahmatullah alayhi. And in his Aqidatul Tahawiyya, he writes this, describing the beliefs of mainstream Muslims, those who try to align themselves with the Quran and the Sunnah and the way of the Sahaba and those who follow them. He says, Al-Mu'minun kulluhum awliya Rahman. Al-Mu'minun kulluhum awliya Rahman. The believers, the Muslims, all of them are the awliya of Allah ar-Rahman. The Muslims, all of them are awliya of Allah, the Most Merciful. So that would suggest that you and me, let alone the likes of the Abu Bakrs and the Umars and the Uthmans and the Alis radiallahu anhum, let alone those who came after them in the second and third and fourth generation, like the Abu Hanifas, the Imam Maliks, the Imam Shafis and the Imam Ahmads, rahimahumullah. Al-Mu'minun kulluhum awliya Rahman. The believers, the Muslims, all of them are awliya of Allah. We can understand why the Sahaba can be Allah's friends and awliya. We can understand why great Imams and pious scholars and pious people like the four Imams can be Allah's awliya. It becomes a little bit difficult to understand how an ordinary sinful Muslim like myself could be, according to Imam al-Tahawi, awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my second question to you, how can it be, and this is correct by the way, what he said is not disagreed with, what Imam Tahawi said has not been differed by anybody, it's accepted. This is the belief of mainstream Orthodox Islam. Al-Mu'minun kulluhum awliya Rahman. Not just the Sahaba, not just the great pious Imams, but all of the Muslims. How do we tie that statement up, that every Muslim is Allah's, amongst Allah's awliya, with the verse that I have read about the awliya? How can we link the two together? How can someone who is a Muslim but he is sinful, perhaps he fasts in Ramadan but outside, and prays in Ramadan but outside of Ramadan he doesn't remember Allah? Perhaps in Ramadan he's very obedient to his parents and he's more conscious of serving them and respecting them and honoring them, just like the Quran says, but outside of Ramadan he couldn't care less about whether his parents are breathing or dying. How can someone who maybe in Ramadan he or she has turned their eyes away from haram things and have left haram money, interest, money through theft, money through deception, money through false claims, but outside of Ramadan it doesn't matter how much money, how money comes to me, I'm going to take it, halal or haram. Someone who's a Muslim who has a few good things, especially in Ramadan, but outside of Ramadan quite a lot of bad things, how is it that that person can also be the awliya, from the awliya of Allah? Anybody has a guess? You didn't know I could be asked questions today, so now you know that for next time I can do it. We have to keep them on their toes, don't we? Can't let them. It's your punishment for me moving. How can anybody? How can ordinary people be Allah's awliya, friends? Let's take this brother first. Bismillah. Why not? Barakallah feekum. If that wasn't a guess, that was a guess with tawfiq from Allah, mashallah, because that is spot on. by the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed and favored every Muslim by definition. Every Muslim by definition, with some level of iman, some level of faith, even if it be only that much, not a mountain full, not a universe full of faith like the Sahaba, just a drop of faith. And by the fact that every Muslim has some level of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear enough just to say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Fear enough to now and again think, oh, what's going to happen to me and my sinful life, that maybe Allah will punish me. Fear enough to think that even though I may be disobeying my parents, it does come into my mind now and again, maybe once a year, that is this really a way that I should be behaving? Is this really what Allah wants of me? So there is some level of God consciousness, mindfulness of Allah, fear of Allah, awareness of Allah. Iman and taqwa is what defines a wali. The more iman and the more taqwa, the greater the waliship with Allah, the greater the level of being a wali with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But everyone who has even that much amount, there is a waliship with Allah, but it's not the waliship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really likes, but He accepts that as starting level. Because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the hadith, Man aadali waliyan faqad aadantu bil harb. Whoever shows enmity to a friend of mine, I shall be at war with him. Then he says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِ. And my servant, and my servant draws closer to me, doesn't draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than the obligatory duties, the fara'id, the wajibat, the fara'id that I have enjoined on me. My servant doesn't draw closer to me with anything else that I love than the obligatory duties. There's nothing Allah says that He loves, He has mahabba for, more than the obligatory duties. The first obligatory duty is shahada, la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The second obligatory duty is salah. First thing that will be taken into account on the Day of Judgment, al-farqu baynana wa baynakum as-salat faman taraku faqad kafaru. The difference between us and them, meaning the non-Muslims, is the prayer. Whoever leaves it has fallen into a type of disbelief. And then the rest of the duties, fasting in Ramadan, of course, comes very high up on the list. Allah tells us that His love, His mahabba, is focused upon the obligatory deeds. And then Allah says, and my servant continues to draw closer to me through the optional deeds. After the fard, we do the sunnahs, and we try to do the nafilah, the nawafil, the optional deeds. And these are all non-obligatory. My servant continues to draw closer to me. Also, my servant doesn't continue to draw closer to me, except through the nafilah, the optional deeds, until I love him. Look at this. Some of our ulama point to a very subtle, latif point here. They say, look, in the beginning, Allah says, my servant doesn't draw closer to me with anything more loved by me than the obligatory actions. Here, Allah is not talking about loving someone as much as He's talking about loving certain actions, obligatory actions. But then in the second part of the sentence, Allah doesn't talk about loving an action, He talks about loving a person. It's as if Allah is saying that, O human being, I created you with a purpose, that you may know me and that you may draw closer to me through worship of me. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah didn't create the jinn or mankind except that we may worship Him. And you have the potential to know me. You have the potential to rise higher than the angels. And O human creature, you have the potential to sink lower than the beasts, amongst the dogs, the monkeys, the cattle, the pig, the lowest thing, you have the potential to sink lower than that. To be khayrul bariyah, the best of creatures, higher than even the angels, it depends upon our iman our taqwa, our ibadah. To sink lower than the low is likewise the same thing. To do with ibadah, iman and taqwa. If we leave them, go against them, then we're sinking lower than the low. But Allah Jalla wa Ala has put inside every human being the potential to fly to Him. The potential to draw closer to Him. Ramadan becomes that month in the year where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to begin to transform our lives. For example, when I was living across the road, and more or less I was part of Leytonstone Leighton for about 40 odd years of my life. So this is really home turf to me. This, even when I was going to secondary school back in the late 70s, this place was a pub. This place was a pub even then. Okay? And a pub only because of drinking, not because of its bricks, not necessarily because of the people, but because of the drinking and whatever else can happen in a pub. It's something that Islam does not like. And then what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants tawfiq, grace and ability to a handful of Muslim men and women in the area, and they start a campaign somehow to buy the pub. Now buying the pub would seem like a wrong thing to do, because we're not allowed to drink. But they wanted to buy the pub to transform it into something that was displeasing to Allah, from being displeasing to Allah to being one of the most pleasing places to Him, to be a house from the houses of Allah. A bayt min buyutillah, which are what mosques are, masajid are, houses of Allah, are the best places on the earth according to the authentic hadith of the Prophet. Allah allowed you all to transform this place from something He doesn't really like and His gaze is not upon it in a happy way, to that which pleases Him so much. Yes or no? Do you not feel that? That Allah gave you the ability to change something from a bad place, because it wasn't just a house, it was a public house, a pub, to something where now it's not a matter of how much you can drink down, it's how much sajdas you can do for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Subhanallah. But I put it to you, my brothers and elders and sisters, if there are any. Even though Allah loves for places to be changed from good to bad, but then after all, what is a place except bricks and stones? More than He wants a place to be changed, He does want places to be changed, but more than He wants places to be changed, He wants the hearts and the souls of people to change. He wants us to be transformed. He wants the Muslims even to be transformed, even in Ramadan. So that, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Are you who believe fasting is prescribed for you, as it was prescribed to those before you? Why? So that we can lose weight. If that comes in our fasting, then it's a bonus, right? And I suppose many of us could do with it. Me first. So that what? So that we could detox our body? Well, if that comes as a benefit, then that's a side benefit. لَأَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That you may, not that you will, that you may become muttaqi, have taqwa, God consciousness, fear of Him, mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can see the transformation beginning to happen. Some people who haven't seen a mosque in 11 years, in 11 months of the year, they're in the masjid. And many of them are youths. See, when you get to 40 plus years old, or even 50 years old, or even 60, there's very little in dunya that can so much distraction. Hormones are dying down. You've been there, you've done that. Probably not everyone does, but some people unfortunately do. And you have more sense and time to focus on Allah. But when you're a 20, 25-year-old, 18-year-old, 16-year-old, hormones are kicking, there's everything in the universe to distract you, and still we find our masajid, let's just talk about the UK, our masajid in the UK, especially in Ramadan, especially in the 10 nights, especially in the odd 10 nights, are filled probably more with young men and women than any other worship. There is some miracle that is going on under our noses, and it's not really because of us. It's because of Allah. He's telling us, oh Muslims, even when you are half asleep to me, even when most of your life is spent in ghafla, in heedlessness of me, but not in dhikr of me, even when most of your life is spent in ma'asiyah, in disobedience of me, not in ta'ah and obedience to me, even if most of your life is spent in kufr, and here kufr doesn't mean disbelief here, but ingratitude to me, and not shukr, gratitude to me, even then, look what I'm prepared to do for you. I am reminding you, it's as if Allah saying, you have the potential to be someone. لَأَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. But don't be a person who fasts and just leaves eating and drinking and conjugal relationships, and we're not really trying to remember Allah, and no doubt at all, the weather is hot. And it's planned to get hotter still, apparently. Okay? So we are going to be melting like ice poles. It's strange. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahmatullahi, in his masterful commentary to Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, he brings this riwayah, this narration from Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha, the lady Aisha radiallahu anha. The lady Aisha says, we the Sahaba, we used to love to fast most when the days were the longest and the season was the hottest. SubhanAllah. I mean, that goes against kind of what you might consider to be common sense. But the Sahaba, they had common sense, but they had a common sense which was seasoned with religion, with iman, with the remembrance of Allah. So that which seems strange to us people seemed very good to them. Why? If the days are longer, we're fasting longer, that can only mean more, drawing more close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. More time to make dua whilst you're fasting, and du'as are always accepted in the state of fasting. More time to be in the worship and the obedience of Allah. Allah is happy, He loves those who do obligatory and recommended acts. And why hotter? Because it makes fasting hard. The harder the fasting, there is a spiritual technology in fasting, my brothers and elders, that when we deny our physical selves, our material selves, our jism, our badan, it's food, it's water, it's drink, it's fulfilling its desires with one's spouse, automatically the ruhani side, the spiritual side of us begins to click, begins to flicker. And if we give it enough time, it begins to burn quite brightly. And that's why the authentic hadith says, Shaitan runs through man like blood runs through the veins. So restrict his passageways through hunger. Through hunger, there is a chance of subduing the nafs, the ego. The nafs is telling me, eat when I want, eat as much as I want, enjoy the dunya, don't forget about Allah. You can turn to Allah when you're 40, 50, 60, you go to Hajj and whatever. Otherwise Allah can wait. The 2020 can't wait. Okay? The tennis can't wait. The other dunya things can't wait. Allah can wait. That's what the ego tells us most of the time. It doesn't matter if I've argued with my blood brother over some dunya issue and I'm not talking to him and it's been 1.5 years now and I haven't even said salam to him. Not a problem. We can push the verse that says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. The believers are not brothers, so make peace and reconciliation with your brother. We can leave that for another day. After it's only the Quran. But Ramadan comes and we're starting fasting, and shaitan is chained. Allah's rahmah is pouring down like an April shower upon us. And the ego is being subdued a bit, and it comes into our minds. Should I be living my life like this? Maybe I need to change. Maybe I need to لَأَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Let me make an effort. And the transformation begins to happen. We become more mindful of Allah. And then we begin to be fit for purpose. We begin to be fit for purpose. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He looks at the fasting. He loves the fasting. He looks at the sadaqah, the charity, and the zakat. He loves the zakat and the charity. He looks at the prayer and he loves the prayer. He looks at the joining the ties of relation, silatul rahim. And he loves joining ties of relation between parents and children, uncles and aunties, cousins and brothers and sisters and whoever it is. Okay, some of the Salaf used to say, you may choose your friends, but Allah has chosen your parents and relatives. That Allah has chosen for us certain people for our parents and certain people for our relatives. There is a wisdom there even if we don't understand it. So we need to pay great attention in keeping that bond, even if that bond doesn't keep ties with me. The Prophet ﷺ said, the wasil, the one who joins ties, is not the one who keeps ties when someone keeps ties with him. Everybody can do that, right? You say salam to me, I'll say salam back to you. My cousin says nice things to me, I'll say nice things back to them. They give me nice Eid presents, I'll give them nice Eid presents. The challenge will come for the Muslim is when my cousins and my uncles and aunties, or God forbid my parents, they don't give salam to me. They don't say nice things about me. Then maybe they say bad things about me. Maybe they don't smile at me ever. Then I think, well, if they do that to me, I'll do that back to them. But ya ikhwan, have we forgotten the words of Allah in the Quran? Idfa billati hiya ahsan. Repel evil with that which is better. Isn't that what Allah says to us? And didn't we find that the Prophet ﷺ was always trying to melt the heart of even those who were his enemies? And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many a time allowed the hearts of the enemies to be melted because the Prophet ﷺ's kindness, compassion, care, and friendliness to them. If I limit Islam to a hat on my head and a beard on my chin or a scarf on my head, and all of those are important matters, all of those are important, everything in Islam is important, but it has priorities. There's priorities. I need to be one who grows the beard on my chin and grow the beard in my heart. Young brothers, don't take that literal because you won't be able to grow a beard in your heart. But if the sunnah is going to adorn me outwardly, let me try to make sure it adorns me inwardly first. Because the mawdu' another, where the divine gaze falls, is first and foremost on the heart. Inna Allah la yanzuru ila ajsamikum wa la ila suwarikum, the Prophet said. Allah doesn't see your forms and your appearances. Allah doesn't care whether you're a man or a woman, black or white, Western or Eastern, highly qualified or nominally qualified. وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُم. But Allah, the Prophet said, sees your hearts and your actions. Hearts to see, is it filled with love of Allah, love of the Prophet, love of the awliya of Allah, fear of Allah, obedience to Allah, trust in Allah, loyalty to His friends, showing compassion and care for others, even if they're not Muslims, for animals even, for the earth itself. And then Allah will look at the actions to see, do they reflect the beliefs in the heart and the iman in the heart. So if the sunnah adorns me outwardly, but I'm the one who has the nastiest tongue, I'm the one who has the hardest heart, I'm the one who has in my heart malice, enmity, hatred, jealousy, enmity, showing off, all of these wicked, dark things in my heart, but outwardly I'm looking the part. That's a type of hypocrisy. I need to change inwardly and outwardly. Sometimes changing outwardly will help me inwardly. And then as I'm inwardly changing, outwardly becomes easy. It's a cycle. So let me just finish. لَأَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Our fasting, as the Prophet ﷺ says in the authentic hadith, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. Whoever doesn't leave off falsehood in speech and in action, Allah is in no need of that person leaving their food and drink for His sake. Because fasting is not just about leaving our food and drink. That is an obligation. But that is, as Imam al-Ghazali says, level 1 of 3 levels of fasting. Level 1 of 3 levels of fasting. And this level is obligatory upon every Muslim, except the one who is a traveller, or is ill, or is very, very old, and they're excused from fasting. And they have to make up the days later, half an hour. Everybody has to do that at this level of keeping away from eating and drinking in Ramadan and spouse relationships. But that's not enough. The second level of siyam or soul means to abstain, to refrain. Remember Maryam alayhi salam? Allah said to her, make soul. Now that Isa alayhi salam is born miraculously, people are gonna, not even married, righteous woman, have a child, not married. Banu Israel, we're very much like Banu Israel. We're very much like Banu Israel. We may look at Banu Israel in the Quran, and we may even look at the children of the Banu Israel now politically, and we may have some words to say about them, but there is so much that resembles us and them. And it's not always positive. So they would, so Allah says, look, Maryam alayhi salam, make soul. Not fast, eating and drinking. Refrain from speaking to the people. I will sort you out. And what happens? Maryam alayhi salam comes at their child. And then the Banu Israel are yapping, making accusations about her, even though she's chaste. Okay, because she is the greatest of all women. Alayhi salam. But what happens? Her baby does the talking for her. She doesn't know what's going to happen, but she just trusts in Allah. Ya Allah, I know my people, they're going to gossip. I don't know what they're going to say about my reputation. My reputation may never recover from what they're going to say. But you took me on this journey, and you put a child inside me without any man touching. And you promised me that he will be from amongst the Salihun. And I don't know how this story is going to unfold for my child. And you made my birth of him, me birthing him, according to some of the tafsir books, less than 9 months and with no labour pains. This is Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. You have done so much for, and when there was no food and the dates were out of season and the oranges were out of season, you just told me, just shake this tree and food will come, and it came for me. How can I not trust you? So now when you tell me don't say anything to my people, and they are going to accuse me of wicked things, I will trust you. I will make soul. I will refrain from speaking. Refrain. Straight. Look, the babe spoke. Isa alayhi salam spoke and just shut everybody up. SubhanAllah. Because when Allah wants to befriend someone and says, oh my slave, you are from my awliya. Wallahi, in this, I used to have friends that used to go to Thompson School. I used to go down to Northampton School. And we used to meet on the estate back in the 70s. It was a time of the right-wing skinheads. They used to put the National Front in. And I could trust 1 or 2 friends. I could trust my life to them. The fact that one of them went to prison, that's a different story, but I could trust my life to them. They would have my back anytime, any place. That's how friendship is. You have this loyalty this trust, never letting it. The stronger the friendship, the stronger these things happen. You're in need of £1,000, I have £1,000, we are close friends, take it. I know you. When Allah befriends someone, you think it's going to be anything lesser than that? When Allah befriends a wali of His, Allah will always have our backs. Allah will never let us down. But friendship is a two-way thing. The friend himself has to have trust of God, loyalty to Allah, love and connection with Allah. Otherwise it doesn't. Ramadan is as if Allah saying, oh my people, become my awliya because I'm waiting. Oh my people, I've given you Ramadan so you can train to become awliya throughout the year. And you'll see the sweetness of drawing closer to me. Because when I start praying and fasting and giving charity, it begins to transform me. So I'm not someone who just gives charity, I become charitable. Small difference in English. Giving charity is one thing, but becoming charitable, where it becomes second nature just to give sadaqah. You don't have to ask me. As soon as I see the need, Ali radiallahu anhu says, the generous man is not the one who gives when he's asked, but the generous one is the one who gives as soon as he sees the need. Because he's transformed. Generosity is not an act, it's a state, it's a hal. It's a state of his heart, a heart. Praying is not just an act, it's a hal. So the Prophet says, Ya Bilal, oh Bilal, give the adhan to allow the coolness of the prayer to come upon us. The sakina that we feel when we're in prayer, give the adhan quickly, so I can be in a state of salah. Because prayer is not an act, it's a state. Sawm is not an act of just keeping away from eating and drinking, it's a state of refraining. Second level of obligatory fasting, the limbs restraining from all that is disobedience to Allah. That's the second obligatory level of fasting. Whoever doesn't leave or falsehood in speech and action, sins, whether of the tongue or of the limbs, Allah has no need of that person leaving their food and drink for him. Because لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, how can we get God consciousness, piety, mindfulness of Allah if my limbs, my eyes, my tongues, my hands, my ears are doing halal? And I will not insult your integrity by telling you how we do haram with our limbs. We know. We know because we are people who do it. And then the third level of fasting, which is not an obligation, but it's the goal that we try to aim for. Fasting of the soul, the fasting of the heart, where the heart abstains from everything that distracts it from the remembrance and the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why in Ramadan we've been told, make juhud, just strive. Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu, it is reported that he used to finish the Quran, a khatam of the Quran 60 times in Ramadan. Once in the morning, once in the night, 30 days. This is not the goal. For sure it's not the goal. One khatam is good. But the idea is, Imam Shafi'i, where throughout the rest of the year he's reflecting on one verse for 1 week, 1 month, 10 months, because that's the norm with the Quran. We read it to understand it, reflect it, so that it can begin to transform. In Ramadan, it's more juhud, it's more effort. Just go through it. So read a khatam. Shafi'i radiallahu anhu finishes 60. Because it's a matter of just doing effort. Make tarawih. Make the 20 rakat tarawih. Even if you lose concentration of what the Imam is reciting, just let your feet stand in obedience to Allah, so that we get used to striving, so that we get the reward. Make lots of dua, give lots of charity. The Prophet ﷺ said, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعِ وَالْعَطَشِ. Subhanallah. Perhaps a fasting person gets nothing for his fast except hunger and thirst. Why? Because the fasting of the limbs haven't been done. The fasting of the heart isn't taking place, not even at a little degree. Then Allah says, O servants, if you can do i'tikaf, to be alone in the masjid with me, to Responsibly take your dunya affairs and push them away for a few days. Responsibly. Don't come into the masjid and say, "Ya Imam, I want to do i'tikaf," and you leave your children with no money and your wife with no money for food and bread and whatever, and we do Allah, Allah, and they can't even make the shopping order or whatever. That's not the thing. We have obligations at home. But if I can push my dunya aside to be alone with Allah, and that's the question I have to ask myself at the end of the day. Do I really want to be alone with Allah? Do I really want to? See, the issue with Muslims isn't, do we want to pray and fast? We do pray and we do fast. The issue tends to be that, do I really want to make Allah my sole object of love, mahabba? Do I want to learn to love Him or have the ability to love Him more than I love anything and everything else? Do I want to learn to have unsu billah, intimacy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's a question we all have to ask ourselves. Ramadan is the time where that question beckons us. Who are we aiming for with our heart? See, there are those of us, which is okay, we are working for the reward. We want Jannah, we want the Hur al-Ain, we want the rivers of milk and honey, we want the palaces of gold and silver. I do this, Allah will reward me this. This is fantastic. This is fantastic. This is Quran. But there are some people who they are attached to the du'as of Prophet. For example, one of the du'as of Prophet, he says, Allahumma inni as'aluka ladhatan nadhar ila wajhika wa shawqa ila liqa'ik. Oh Allah, grant me the opportunity to gaze at your face.